Hi there, it's Llarold, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about BlizzCon 2023 and what we learned about the future of World of Warcraft. I have some educated guesses about what we can expect in terms of Season 4 and the next beta and the next expansion, and then some more guesses about the two expansions to follow. I'd initially recorded like 35 minutes of recap stuff and opinion on the announcement at BlizzCon, but here's the thing. It was really long, I had no idea what the video should be to accompany it, and my opinion is that it looks pretty good. So instead, I think you should just watch the BlizzCon stuff. It's on YouTube. Blizzard put it all out as nicely edited YouTube videos, pretty easy to watch, and it's just all really good news. I like everything we've heard about the future of WoW. I like that there's specifically designated content for solo players that's actually rewarding for their time. I like that you can do stuff cross-realm without any real friction, and I like warbands. Alts are going to be sharing reputations, alt bank, shared gold, reagent bank, all the stuff that would make a game feel modern is finally being implemented into WoW. That's great. Most of all, I like that WoW seems to finally have a well-structured, planned content release schedule. I think this is great for the long-term health of the game. Having patches get put out and then there's just like no new content in a live service game for literally over 12 months is not very good. It's pretty egregious, actually, considering that this is a subscription model game. Blizzard clearly can do a good job and make things that we like. The problem has just been a lack of a consistent plan for releasing that content. I find that kind of relatable. Haha. So anyway, last little bit here. In an interview that wasn't broadcast at BlizzCon, Ian Hazzikostas confirmed that Dragonflight is getting a Fated season, but not an entire new content patch and raid and all of that, but a new season of Mythic Plus. We'll kind of get to revisit the raids again, just like in Shadowlands. I liked that, so I'm pretty happy about that. Also, we're still getting patch 10.2.5 in like 8 weeks or so from now, probably early January. And patch 10.2.5 will introduce dynamic flying everywhere in Azeroth. It'll open up dynamic flying on all of the mounts, not just the dragon riding mounts. I think that's correct. And Drakthir's Soar will become a straight-up dynamic flying method in that patch as well. So with that being said, now I'm just going to talk about my expectations for the expansion timeline over the next couple of years. Alright, so here I have a spreadsheet that I've cooked up, and I have two sheets on this spreadsheet. One is the expansions with their release dates and how long each of them lasted, how many patches they had, how many raid tiers they had. Raid tiers is maybe a little harder to define in some of these cases. You know, you go all the way back to the Burning Crusade, 6 raid tiers, arguably, if you're including like Karazhan as a raid tier. Some of these like Mists of Pandaria, you know, how many raid tiers are you counting? Mogashen Vaults and Heart of Fear and Terra City in the Spring as? Is that 1 raid tier? I would say yes, so that's 3 total for that expansion, but hey, whatever. I think in general, a lot of this older stuff really isn't that indicative of anything other than like maybe some release patterns. Like you'll notice if you look at these release dates, so this is American date formatting, so, you know, suck it, Europe. We got November, January, November, December, September, November, August, November, and then November, right? So they really love releasing expansions at the end of the year, November in particular, but like Cataclysm was the one December one, Burning Crusade was the one January one. They really are big fans of winter releases. Now they have said that their next expansion release is going to be in the fall. So we know, like, again, this is America, so we know that fall is 3 months. Fall is September, October, and November are the fall months. December, January, February are the winter months, and then more importantly for us, the spring months are March, April, and May. Now they've said that War Within is going to be in March 2024. So that's obviously one of those 3 months, March, April, or May. And realistically, we can kind of assume that the War Within beta is going to last around 6 months. We know that War Within is going to release in fall of 2024, so it's going to be either September, October, or November. So, like, if we look at these release dates of March 2024 for the War Within beta and, like, let's say September 17th, 2024 for War Within expansion actual release, that's right around 6 months. I think that's pretty reasonable. It also would put the date on Dragonflight being out. 22 months, 658 days. That would be right on par with Cataclysm, which is one of the, technically, I think the second shortest expansion. Warlords of Draenor only had 2 raid tiers. Sort of, I mean, it had 3 raids, but only really 2 tiers. And that was like sort of a weirdly abbreviated and elongated expansion because it had so little content. It really was the shortest expansion. It didn't last all that long, but there was so little happening in it that it felt like it was incredibly long because the patch cycles themselves were insanely long because there was nothing happening in that expansion. Blizzard seems like, I would say, really the ones that are indicative of where we're at now and what the expansion cadence is going to be like going forward, I think, are the last 2. We're talking Shadowlands and Dragonflight. Now, Shadowlands is kind of hard to get a beat on, too, because it was developed in part during the pandemic. I mean, we're also assuming that there's going to be no pandemics going forward, which, hey, I'm trying not to die of COVID a third time, so let's just assume that there won't be anymore. They have said that their plan is to release War Within, Midnight, Last Titan, all of that, get that whole saga wrapped up before 2030. Now that doesn't mean that they'll have, whatever the new expansion that wouldn't necessarily be out like 2029 then if Last Titan is releasing in 2028, just simply that they would have basically the final patch of Last Titan out before 2030. And I think that lines up pretty well with the idea that they would release in like July and May of 2026 and 2028 for Midnight and The Last Titan. Now that is very, very much a case of conjecture, but they did say repeatedly throughout the weekend, I believe both Holly and Chris Metzen said that they've been working on putting the games out faster, basically, like reorganizing the company, reorganizing the WoW team toward being able to release content faster and more consistently. And that's where I want to look at the patch cadence, because patch cadence from Battle for Azeroth up through Dragonflight, I think is a lot more instructive on how the game is like developing as we're moving forward. All right, and here we have the patch cadence sheet that I've worked up, and this only goes back to BFA because BFA is when Blizzard started rolling out these 0.5 midway patches, these sort of smaller patches. I think they call them minor patches, and they actually didn't start doing this at the beginning of BFA. As you can see, the first patch of BFA 8.0, it lasted for 4 months. It had Uldir, and then we just went directly into 8.1 with Battle of Dazar'alor, and it wasn't until 8.1.5 released Allied Races and also the Darkmoon Faire roller coaster ride about 3 months into that patch that they started establishing this as a concept. And this sort of fits the old school pre-Dragonflight approach to patch timing. Like 8.0 specifically is a bit of a weird outlier, but for the most part, a lot of these patches, 8.1, 8.2, they're about 6 months, 7 months. We can look at this with like Castle Nathria 9.0. It's about 8 months. 9.1 and 9.1.5, close to 7 months. Like it's about a 6 or 7 month cycle that a raid will be out. And that repeats over and over for however many raids there are in expansion. And then you get to the final raid of the expansion and it's out for 10 to 12 months. And in some cases, if we go back to the previous page and look at like Warlords of Draenor or Mists of Pandaria, Siege of Orgrimmar, and Hellfire Citadel, those were out for over a year. But thankfully that hasn't been the case in a long time. But like, again, coming to Shadowlands here, patch 9.2, about... what is this, 6, 7, 9 months that Sepulchre, the first ones, was out before patch 10.0 came out, Dragonflight actually launched. So fairly long final patch, over 6 months generally for each patch prior to that. Then Dragonflight came along and kind of redefined the whole paradigm and also put a lot more emphasis on those 0.5 patches. Again, these 0.5 patches, their consistency was non-existent even when they started doing them in BFA. Like they had a 1.5 patch, they had a 2.5 patch, but then they didn't have a 3.5 patch at all. There just was 8.3, Ny'alotha, and then wait until Shadowlands comes out. In Dragonflight, it's basically every 8 weeks. 8 weeks after Vault of the Incarnates came out, 10.0.5 came out, delivering the Forbidden Isles and just whatever. A bunch of class balance changes. That's certainly good. Helps keep the game feeling fresh. And then 8 weeks after that, 10.0.7 came out. And then 6 weeks after that, 10.1 came out. Now, maybe the biggest deviation here is that 10.1, it was more like 10 weeks before 10.1.5 came out, but they did release Augmentation Evokers, which was a pretty radical shift in terms of game balance. And they also added Dawn of the Infinite and, time rifts and like quite a lot of stuff in that patch. And I mean, 2 weeks isn't that big of a deal, but sort of this idea of every 8 to 10 weeks, there will be new content in WoW. There will be new stuff in WoW. It has finally been codified as a law in Dragonflight. And that seems to be something that is moving forward. Like if we're looking right now, patch 10.2 came out November 7th. Around the first full week of January 9th would be 8 weeks after, and that's when we would expect to get 10.2.5. Now, because it's the beginning of the year, that may get pushed back a couple of weeks. Maybe it's more like later January. It's more like a 10-week cycle because of end of the year stuff. That seems pretty reasonable, but either way, we can very reasonably expect January to be when 10.2.5 happens, and then we're doing dynamic flight all over the world. We're doing dragon riding on like horses and stuff, and that should be pretty cool. And then we can expect 10.2.7 about 8 weeks after that, so about the middle of March. And then I think realistically, we could probably expect Fated Raids 10.2.7a to come along probably about 2 months after that, so May. And then at that point, we're staring down maybe 3 or 4 months until the expansion release, which would put it right in the middle of September. And then I think that is a release schedule that Blizzard's probably going to carry forward through all three of these next announced expansions. War Within, Midnight, and Last Titan. We're probably going to be getting the same exact patch release cycle, patch release frequency as we have in Dragonflight. And I think it's worked really well. I think it has been a big improvement over everything that Blizzard has done in all the previous expansions where they just had no consistency at all. Good content, but you never know when it's going to come. It just sort of gets announced a month before it's coming out. And I'm glad to see that. Like, I think it really is a great move for the long-term health of the game to know that new stuff is coming every 2 months, basically, and have something to look forward to all the time. All right, I think that pretty much is it. So thanks for watching. Bye.